cut him short. Does anybody have any questions for Thomas immediately? Anybody feeling that they've picked up a nugget or two there, sort of a bit more insightful? Want to share what those are? See some nods. You feeling great?
There is a lot of stuff there. I do not expect like it's kind of just highlighting as much as I can that I find interesting about it that might be beneficial to you, whether you are autistic or not. I think there's probably a lot of things that even a lot of autistic people do not know about autism. So that's why I included all of that.
And my grandson is just in the process of being diagnosed, whether it's autism or ADHD. And hearing this makes me feel sort of a bit more comforted about some of the things he does. You know, he does do certain things, but it's just made me think. Actually, if we as a family change the way we are towards him, it will make life better for him. But yeah, I'm going to go back and say to my daughter, he needs to, you know, get hold of this chappy.
There's a lot of value that we can add to
I think in schools
the lives of
they take so long to get the diagnosis, but they also he has been perceived as being the naughty boy.
Well, me too, as well. Yeah.
Which is quite sad, really. He's only like 8, you know. It's quite sad to think. He should enjoy going to school, but there are times when he hasn't enjoyed it. I think it's because there's been this, you're the naughty child because you've been playing with something, so he's taken something away from you and reacted to it.
I did that as well. Yeah. It's, I mean, school system's never going to be easy. Like, I would love to say that it's like more, it might be a bit more inclusive nowadays, but generally it's quite a hard time for autistic people, especially in mainstream settings. But I think generally if you have a sort of a view of trying to advocate more for their way of being, even if it's little things like sensory supports and things of that nature, I think it can go a long way in helping them. But yeah, I mean, people have a lot of different characterizations of autistic people. My skills, I was hyperlexic when I was younger, so I used to read and write before I went to primary school. I was very, very good at it, but when I went to primary school, it all dropped off because of the social environment, the sensory environment. It can be very overwhelming. Hello.
Yeah, my son, he's gone through sort of mainstream school, and he's actually now just been diagnosed at 24.
Wow.
With ADHD, clearly ADHD, and it was a really hard journey for him and for us as parents, because, you know, again, the schools sort of do tend to sort of put in a bit of a box.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's just dyslexic, or it just takes him a long time. He's sort of a caring, wants to make sure that everyone's settled in the class before he sits down and settles. And that sort of, and his character is very, he's a lovely young man, but he gets very overwhelmed, and the hyper-focus has always been the thing, looking back through, you know, hyper-focusing on Lego.
But it's a weird one of focus, isn't it? Because in some jobs that's a good thing, some things it's not. Like if you're going to get into a job in coding where you're sat at a computer for 10 hours, it's like, great, that's like brilliant, but go for a job which requires you to like divide your attention between lots of different things, it can be quite difficult for some people. So
yes, and I think that the people's skills, even though, you know, it's the communication and the social side of it and the overwhelming and everything, I think is something that is but it's interesting to see how much he's actually just come back to join the admin team here.
Cool.
And you know, it's good because the focus now is he knows more what he wants to do.
There's a lot of, especially when people go undiagnosed, a lot of people attribute negative personality traits to the individuals instead of understanding that their brain's different. it's an interesting one when people get diagnosed. Sort of, I would say that's probably a late diagnosis. Then I imagine with 2040, say it's yeah. Looking back,
when you said about like the 3 things on your list, and I very much find that with Tom at home as well. I leave him a list of just 3 things.
Yeah.
And he loves it. He's fine with that. But anything more, or bursting in and saying, guess what, Tom, we've got to do this and do this like this, I can send him into a total spiral quite quickly.
It's not that I'm like overreactive to changes being happen. It's more like, I think as I've got older, I'm pretty adaptable. Yeah. But there is like a limit to it, I think, and it generally, like, it's not always like a clear cut, this is the way to do it, because there's so many other factors that go into it, just general everyday stresses that most people experience, as well as like mental health. I think those can all impact someone's functioning sort of on a day-to-day. It's a very complex thing, it's very personal, and that's the issue about it, because it's hard to give straight up advice because everyone is so different, they work differently.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay, last 2, James quickly, and then we'll come up to you.
I've got quite a few people who work in wards who come to me being overstimulated from that ward-based environment. Do you have any advice on how to help people who are overstimulated?
Probably a good one. I mean, there's 2 ways of going about it. One is allowing or providing some sensory supports which allow them to modulate the input that they're getting. Easy ones would be headphones, sunglasses. There are also long-term fixes that people can make which are around sensory adjustments, so like dimmable lights, sometimes the hue of lights, but it's very varied person to person what they find overstimulating, but I think there's a lot of ways that you could go about it. I think you know, you could even if you can't make adjustments to like the lighting, and you can't separate cafes from working aspects. You know, you have the smells of coffee and food and things like that, which can be overstimulating for some people. Alternatives, you could have sensory rooms, quiet rooms. Don't really need to be kitted out that much, but just generally need to be quite quiet and, you know, chill. Might be good to have a place like that. If you can't make all those big adjustments, or like maybe if they don't have a job where they have to interact with people face to face, perhaps having a conversation about working from home on the laptop some days, sort of manage that sort of stress over the long term. A lot of autistic people in general work part-time, just because of it can be quite hard for us to be in outside environments for large periods of time, especially when they are very sensory. What was the other thing that you said? Was that, did they cover it, or was that? Yeah, okay. There's a lot of things. There's a paper from NDTI that if you come to me after, I'll share the paper. They did a whole dive with a whole team of autistic people who go into various hospitals and places to make sensory sort of assessments and recommendations, and they have a whole paper on like different things that I think it was actually a hospital's. I was working on a team actually making sensory adjustments in hospitals, so probably have a lot more to say on that, but I did gloss over it because I waffled too much on the first half of my slides.
Go ahead.
This whole talk's been very interesting to me as someone who's actually been referred by the GP for an ADHD assessment, which is about 4 years. But I was just wondering, how is the brain different between someone that's autistic, neurodivergent, and ADHD?
So neurodivergent is a very, very large umbrella. So it just basically describes anyone who has a different brain in a sense. There are some general differences between autism and ADHD. think things related to novelty and the style of focus. ADHDers do mask as well, but it tends to be a bit different in the way that it happens. There is a really great page and researcher called Dr. Megan Neff, who's autistic ADHD themselves. Quite often they make a lot of Instagram posts on their Misdiagnosis Monday, where they'll do comparisons between ADHD, autism, pretty much anything out there. They'll do some kind of, what do you call them, where you have two circles that kind of overlap and you have like Venn diagram, yeah. That kind of thing, and it's very, very helpful. Very great resource for Dr. Megan Neff from Neurodivergent Insights.